Our first teller tonight, Mary Landberg, is an award-winning photographer. She's a published author, a devoted hospice nurse, who is a unique witness to the courageous stories of her patients' journeys into the land of death and dying. Her latest book, Enduring Love, Inspiring Stories of Love and Wisdom at the End of Life, was published last week, and it's chock full of messages from the dying about living life fully while we are alive. Mary Landberg is also available to give presentations on death and dying, and so let's give a big hand for Mary Landberg.
Thank you, Mark. It was a sweltering, triple-digit Wednesday in late July when I was getting ready to meet a 51-year-old man named Jared who was dying from AIDS. He was living with his 84-year-old girlfriend, Lois, in a camper with her 2 chihuahuas somewhere in Cave Junction, and his needs became so great that she just couldn't take care of him anymore. So she called in 911, an ambulance came to pick him up, and then he was in his new temporary home in the ER at Three Rivers Hospital. His family was scrambling to try to find a place for him to die. Nobody wanted to take him in. He had uncles and brothers and his mother and his son, and no one wanted to take him in because they were afraid of his disease and they were afraid of death. So his mother reluctantly said, "Okay, I'll take him in." So I got my gear ready and I went to the pharmacy and I started heading towards Selma. And I called the physician who tended to him the night before because I didn't have a lot of information about him. And the physician said he was in pain, he had infected wounds, and he has a really interesting family. And I said, "Funny interesting? Silly interesting?" He said, "Just be prepared." So it took me an hour and a half. I got to Selma, pulled up in front of this double wide that had seen many better days. It was in the middle of nowhere, and I could not believe what I felt and what I saw and what I heard. There was this music that was blaring from this house. I could feel it in my chest, while inside my car with the windows rolled up. It was a form of heavy metal called doom metal, and it sounded like this. Apparently, some people find it relaxing. And then there were these 2 pit bulls who looked like they wanted to eat me, and they were so upset, and they were barking and showing their teeth. And I could feel that in my chest also, and I felt a little fear, but then I realized there was an 8-foot-high chain-link fence around the whole property. So I got my bag, and I started walking up this walkway, and I noticed there were 9 Harley-Davidsons all around. And just for a second, in my mind, I pushed one of them to see and go, tink, 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 tink. So I walked up the driveway, and this lovely lady was trying to make the best of the situation. She had dozens of plastic flowers planted all over her yard, and garden gnomes just strewn everywhere. So I walked up to her front door, and I felt my stress kind of rise because of the on this side and the woo on this side, and my stress was rising, and I rang the doorbell, and surprisingly the music stopped, and a creature answered the door. 20-something-year-old kid, probably 7 feet tall, pasty white, shaved his head like this. He had Satan horns surgically placed in his forehead. He shaved his eyebrows. They were covered in piercings. He had cat eye contact lenses, and he had a hole in his chin. Have you seen those spacer earrings people wear to make their ear holes big? He had one in his chin, and it was a piece of plexiglass, and you could see his rotten teeth and his red gums and all the blood in there. And he looked at me without moving his lips. He said, "Are you with hospice?" And I opened my mouth and I said, and then I cleared my throat and made it sound natural. I said, "Yes, my name is Mary. What is yours?" And he said, "What's your name?" So his name was he stood aside and allowed me to come in. And as I walked past him, he said, "Death sentence verified." life, and people are scared, and they're worried, and they're fearful, as were his brothers and uncles inside that dark house, with foil on the windows spray painted black. These men were big, beefy, biker, hard, punk rock people, and they all had their arms crossed, and they were arguing with each other, and I thought, wow, am I safe? I have to get to Jared. I said, where's Jared? And pointed to the kitchen, and I went in there, and oh, I thought, oh great, a normal person. It was the mother, Jared's mother. And she was stirring a pot of something, and I said, hey, hi, my name's Mary. And she turned around, and she had on this apron that had the torso of a voluptuous woman in a bikini on it. You're okay. And I thought, oh, what are you making? And she said, I'm making cock doggies. And I didn't know what a cock doggy was, but there was a stuffed bobcat on her kitchen table. I said, where's Jared? And she pointed this way, and that way there was a screen door with a big hole in it and a goat's head poking through. Weird sound, I remember. Poking through. And I went out through the hole in the screen. I said, where's Jared? And he said, my dad's in there. And there was a railroad car. Old, rusty railroad car, no windows, just the sliding glass, the sliding door in the front, with a blue tarp over the front, and there was weeds this high. And I said, your dad's in that railroad car? It's July. It's 106 degrees outside right now. And he said, yeah. So I knocked on the railroad car, which activated the chihuahuas, and they came afterwards, and then picked up the dogs by the scruff of their neck and took him in the house. By this point, my nerves were shot. I was so stressed and a little fearful. So I moved aside the blue tarp on the door, and a wave of heat hit me. And the first thing I saw was Lois, the 84-year-old girlfriend, wearing a leopard print onesie and a big red wig that was on the side. And clearly, she had not put use a mirror when she put on her copious amounts of makeup that was melting off of her face. She had a tennis racket in her hand, and she bopped him on the head. And I asked why, and she said, well, if I used a fly swatter, that would hurt. And that's when I noticed the flies. The railroad car was full of flies, and they were landing on his wounds. His HIV-positive, pussy, bloody wounds on his forehead and his chest and abdomen. And they were coming at me. So I felt a little fear at that point. So this was ridiculous. My instinct was call Adult Protective Services right now, get this man out of here, which I had done. But I thought for just 1 second, I decided, I gave him some pain medicine. I put another more pain medicine on his cinder block nightstand and said that the pain isn't resolved in 20 minutes, take another one. I'm going in the house, we're having a meeting with your family. So I went into the house, and there was all these big tough guys going like this, and I said, sit down. We're having a meeting. I told him everything. I told him what was happening to Jared physically and emotionally. I told him why things were happening to him physically. I told him what to expect in the next weeks, days, hours, months. I told him what the last breath looks like. And then I offered opportunities for questions, and amazing discussions followed. In the 40 minutes I was there, these big, burly, mean-looking guys relaxed. They relaxed. Some of them cried. Some shared their pain. And we all came into an agreement that we were bringing Jared inside. So all these guys went outside, got Jared, brought him in. Together we cleaned him up, we bathed him, we dressed his wounds, we got a pain management protocol put together. They had a schedule on who's going to come when, take care of him, feed him. It was such an amazing effort. So when death and dying is no longer a scary mystery, people can get to what matters most, and that's love and connection. And what I saw in the uncles, these big, burly, scary-looking men, is that something softened in them. It seems like these hard edges of these seemingly tough people tend to melt when it comes to urgent matters of the heart. The ego can shatter, vulnerability surfaces, when people realize that their tough exteriors have no control over the outcome of a terminal illness. So 4.5 hours after being in this house in Selma, I decided my job is done. So I got my car and I drove to the river and I jumped in, close chicken. And I sat underwater and I just let the river wash me clean. I let it wash me clean of the judgment that I had for these people. I washed my fear away, my anxiety and stress was washed away. And I know now more than ever that we cannot judge people by their covers. All of us in this room are carrying around some level of pain, trauma, unresolved grief that shows up exterior or interior through our mouths or whatever. We have to be nice to everybody. So I got out of the river. I took all my clothes off and I drove in my shoes and I drove home in my bra and underwear, hoping that a cop didn't pull me over because I wasn't wearing a mansion set or anything. So later, when I told my colleagues about this story, they said, "Mary, you were insane for going into that house. You could have been hurt or whatever." And now I reply, "Oh, maybe just temporarily."